Hello, keyboard friends. I've got the Luminkey 80 right here in my hands for this review. And well, this is an actual board that's actually for sale now, as opposed to most of my reviews that come out far too late. So if you are interested in purchasing this board, there's a link in the description. Whether or not I recommend that you purchase this board is something that you'll find out if you watch this video. So let's get into it. This is a CNC'd aluminum, 7-degree angle, TKL. The version I have here is E-coated in white, and I have the fully built version as opposed to the bare bone version. So this comes in the bare bone version, which is $215. And then it comes fully built with switches and caps for $280 US. That's the version that I have here, and I chose that for a very particular reason, which we'll get into. So yeah, it's by Luminkey, who's a vendor that's new to me and new to a lot of people. They're coming out with a 65 real soon. I think it might actually be out, but we're just going to talk about the TKL, what the TKL means, what we can compare it to, and how it compares to those individual things. Alrighty, here is our keyboard. So let's start with disclosure, then we'll check out what's in the box. Disclosure, this was sent to me as a review unit. I don't get to keep it unless I pay for it. It needs to basically go back or be sent away. Nobody from Luminkey gets to choose what I say on this review. And as always, this channel has no sponsors except for you guys that are watching. So let's start with what's in the box. And prior to starting with what's in the box, let's talk about why I got what I got in particular. Now, I get a lot of random people sliding into my DM saying, hey, Simon, do you want to review our keyboard? And more often than not, I say no. More often than me publicly reviewing a board like I'm doing now, I will do a private review in which I will take all my notes, write them all up, and then send it privately to the makers, and then it's done with. We're going to be comparing this a lot to Gateron. And even though I have not reviewed publicly any Gateron, I have a Q3 and a K8 that I both received for private review. So those notes were sent out, and hopefully those were used to ameliorate the product. This, however, is the Luminkey. So random guys slide into my DMs. Hey, Simon, you want to check out a keyboard? And I look at it. I'm like, well, all right, it's a real keyboard. You know, it's not a, like a mass-produced thing like a Gateron where, the plate is bent steel and the case is cheating to make it that it's made out of aluminum by giving it just aluminum sides. No, it's a real keyboard. It's got an aluminum top, aluminum bottom, little copper weight, decently hefty, rather on the low side. I think this is about 1.8 kilos. But that's good for what it is, at least wireless. So I said, you know what? Fine, let's see how you compare to Gateron in terms of a fully built unit. The reason why I didn't compare this to something like the Cycle 8, because the Cycle 8 is going to have many thousands of units, this probably won't. And the only advantage that this realistically has over the competition is the fact that you can get it fully built. So naturally, I asked for fully built, and I asked for E-coat because white E-coat is incredibly easy to screw up. So I wanted to see how good their finishing was. So after some time, keyboard arrived. I've been using it for a month, which is how often I will use a keyboard, or how long I will use a keyboard prior to reviewing it, just to get all the ins and outs. So finally, what's in the box? Well, first things first, it comes in a hard case. That's great. Love a hard case. You can take it to work. It's not creating excess garbage. Protects the keyboard. Comes with a little sticker. It says if it's white, winkeyless, white, or winky. Both of those layouts. Dude, how is my camera just... Oh my god. Is that on the lens? All right, I apologize. It looks like the inside of my camera fogged up for some obscure reason. All right, white wing keyless, white wing key, both of those are options. And then you can choose your keycap set. You have 9009 or white on black. I chose 9009, it's a classic. And then assembled or bare bone. So those are basically the options. Assembled, you only have one switch type, which I don't think is a bad thing. And bare bone, you get the keyboard. The keyboard has a polycarbonate plate, and that is the only option. So let's have ourselves a little look-see. So, hard case. These foams were in the keyboard. I have since removed them. As a matter of fact, it sounds a lot better without them. But they're installed by default. We get some accent caps for the 9009 set, otherwise it's just beige. We get a nice little coiled cable, which more often than not is just going to be used for charging because this has wireless support. We get a tiny little screwdriver, which is terrible. And there is a keycap / switch puller that I can't even find. It's just a random bent piece of metal, and it's not even worth including in the box, but it is what it is. Inside we have our little envelope. Inside the envelope we have FCC certification. We have a assembly information right there. So it shows when this was assembled, and I made sure to see that this was assembled prior to me accepting a review unit. So this is not a cherry-picked unit. This is basically what anybody should be getting, as well as who built it, Dan, shout out Dan. And we've got our information here. Information, a little bit wonky. This is what we call a tri-mode PCB. That means it has, you guessed it, 3 modes. Mode number 1, you plug it in via a cable. It's a keyboard. Type on the keyboard, it works. USB, it's amazing. Mode number 2 is what I'm currently using, which is using a dongle. I'm not going to pull it out of the computer. You know what a dongle looks like. It's 2.4 gigahertz, just like a mouse or an OEM keyboard. And the third mode is Bluetooth, where you can pair it to your iPad or whatever else only takes Bluetooth and won't take USB. Cool. The fact that this is in here is an absolute requirement because turning it on is hard, changing modes is hard. But yeah. There are some notes for those people that will be building it themselves that specifically says, hey, this switch right here, one of the feet have to be cut off. It happens with hot swap PCBs, and it happens specifically with hot swap PCBs that support ISO. So this keyboard actually supports ISO layout, which is great. Good job. So that's what's in the box. Now, obviously you get a keyboard, and in my case, Dan, shout out Dan, has built me a nice looking keyboard. Do a little external tour, let's get an idea, and then we'll start peeking inside. All right, let's get a little close up just so you guys can see. The E-coat is good. It's a creamy white. It's not, they call it E-retro white, which is beige. Okay, I love beige. Okay, I have known to enjoy beige. Okay, so E-coat is good. Generally for E-coat, what I'm looking for is like little micro scratches or little nicks on the edges, like along this chamfer here. But looks good all the way across. It's very clean. The texture is what you would assume of E-coat. It's a little bit rougher than anodization, but still very, very smooth compared to something like powder coat or whatever. Okay, over here we have a little copper badge. I'm not a big fan of badges on the front of keyboards. This hasn't bothered me at all. So it's that kind of small little thing where like it's not being shoved in my face. and I respect that. Let's have a quick little look at its side profile. Actually, we'll do it on the overhead. So, side profile is clean, not needlessly complex, but still gives you something to hold on to. Generally, that's an issue for heavier boards, not for lighter boards, because for heavier boards, you can just like grab it like this and run off. But it's nice to have something to grab here so you can always lift up your board. Second thing is we can see that it is a seamless design. We have our top piece here, have our bottom piece here. Fairly standard. All the edges have a small little chamfer to them. You know, you're not going to be cutting yourself on the corners. Looks fine. On the top side, we have a USB port, which is very accommodating of very large, chunky connectors. It's also placed very far down, which I consider better because theoretically, let's say you have a cable plugged in and then you slap your super heavy headphones on it. If the port is very high up, there's a likelihood you end up bending the connector or something like that. But when the connector is already sitting super, super low, when you come in and smack it, nothing happens. It's fine. So nice to see. This also means that there is a daughter board inside, which, yeah, that's fine. And finally, the bottom. The bottom, nice, clean, simple. The feet are small, and it's the style of feet that you'd see on like the Matrix 1.2 OG, in which like they come off really easily. Not an issue. So haven't had any of the feet come off. The adhesive on them is fantastic. Yes, that's for all of you asking for the feet review. Here, let's get an in-depth look on the feet. Right there. It's a hard rubber. It's good. What more is there to say? On the back, we have ourselves a copper weight. This is a through weight, which means we can see it on the back and we can see it on the inside as well. Very, very handy. So let's talk about my experience when I first got this. So when I first got this, the instruction manual kind of helped me out. It turns out you have to turn the keyboard on for it to work, which, okay, sure. Now on the Gateron, that's just a button here, like a little slidey thingy. Here you have to pull out this key. Wait, no, you have to pull out this key. Cool, and I just took the top off the switch. That's your on-off switch. Yeah, keycaps are very tight, which then makes the on-off kind of a pain to do. So as a result, this has been on since the day I got it. Okay, let me reassemble this switch. We'll talk about the switches and the caps and everything later. Okay, so the second you get the board, it's in the off position. And when it's in the off position, it's off. I know, it's mind-blowing. So after turning it on, you can switch it into multiple modes by holding one of the keys down here and changing the modes. I'm going to leave it in 2.4 gigahertz mode, but I'm going to turn it off because I do want us to open it and look inside. So as a tri-mode board, there are batteries inside. My battery life has been good. I have plugged it in once over the course of 4 weeks. I don't know how the battery charge level was when I got the board, but it lasted for about 2.5 weeks. And then I plugged it in and it's still going just fine. So let's have ourselves a look at the interior as I talk about my experience from first getting this board. So first thing I did was try and remap it. And so, you know, I plugged it in, went to VIA, nothing popped up. But then I saw, okay, there's a, like I went on their site, there's a VIA JSON, you have to load the draft definition. Okay, fine. So I went and I got that and it didn't work. Turns out they made a mistake while creating the JSON file, and therefore you just couldn't remap your keyboard. Thankfully, I was building this live on stream where there was this very smart guy called Sipalot, if you've ever heard of him. He likes to make very high quality keyboards. And he was able to notice that they made a small mistake in like the top of the JSON file. So he gave me a fixed JSON file. I reached out to Luminkey. I told him, hey, you guys screwed up. This file doesn't work. Here's a working file. And they updated it the next morning when they woke up. So good, but shouldn't have happened. And if it had happened to somebody that literally didn't have a PCB designer sitting in their chat, they would be unable to remap their keyboard. Since then, at least everything has been functioning well. But it was off to a really rocky start, and I was really upset with the experience that I had at least day one, because I got this board as a sort of direct competitor to a good Keychron board, if such a thing exists. But that's how I envisioned this. This is like a Keychron board that's like gonna actually feel like a custom, as opposed to like, you know, like a mass-produced block. And that was not a good primary experience. My first experience with Keychrons is I plugged it into VIA, didn't need to load any custom drafts, it just worked. And after I set it up, I unplugged it, and then I could just connect it via Bluetooth to anything, and my key map still worked, and it was great. Now, Keychron doesn't have tri-mode. Tri-mode's a lot better. Dongle, kind of lit. So, after fighting with it for a couple hours on stream, finally getting it working. Keep in mind that if you pick one up now, you're not going to have the same issues I did. Your boy Simon took one for the team. So first thing I did is I opened it up just to get an idea of, hey, how's the build? You know, how did Dan, shout out to Dan, how did Dan do when he built the board? Turns out, pretty good. Obviously, he built it with all the foams, so we went and just removed all the foams. All right, let's get this open. There we go, our top. Ooh, I was wrong. It is not a through weight. I misremembered. There is an internal weight. So actually, that's not a weight. That's just aluminum. So this covers up the batteries, which we will have a look at. Anyway, took all the foams out and then gave it a try. Just, you know, just to see. Turns out it sounded great. As a matter of fact, I'll say this now, and I'm probably going to say it like 3 other times during this review. But throughout the last month where I've been typing on this keyboard, I have never, ever gotten so many questions about, hey Simon, what board are you using? It sounds good. It's very rare to happen on stream. But people seem to really like the sound of the board. And you know what? I really like the feel of the board. Sure, it's hot swap only. Sure, the only like logical way to get this keyboard is if you're getting it fully built. And the only time you're doing that is like in very, very niche situations. All right, there we go. All right, so we've got it torn down. I do apologize. It is not a through weight. Let's do a little tour, starting with the bottom, moving on to the top case, and then we'll talk about, you know, build and all of that. So this is a 2200 milliamp hour. I assume this is also a 2200 milliamp hour. That's 4400 milliamp hours at 16.28 watt hours. That's the more correct thing. Battery lasts a long time. So it looks like both batteries go into the daughter board. Daughter board connects via a thin ribbon cable to the PCB. I haven't had an issue with it. And yeah, that's that. Yee! So fun fact, that's in there, so that doesn't happen. So let's just put a single screw in there just for safety. So yeah, this is a 6063 aluminum. Might be 5 series actually. Give me a second. I mean, this is super thin. It's really hard to tell. But I assume this is 63. All right, let's close that up, put a single screw in there so we can actually fiddle around with it without batteries coming out and, you know, causing a house fire. All right, so purely external copper weight. We've got a aluminum, presuming 63, but from the sound, it sounds like 5 series. Doesn't really matter. That's forward-facing, internal forward-facing. So generally, you do this to avoid acoustic dead zones where you know the battery's going to sound different than like the empty hole between the batteries versus not having the batteries. So this just gives you a uniform aluminum sound or aluminum resonance as you type anywhere on the board. Bottom, fairly simple. Again, this is fully CNC'd. Remember that the price point for this board, fully built, is $280, which is, I mean, it's on the high end of the low end. But mostly when we talk about the low end, I'm talking about low end in terms of price, not in terms of like quality or anything. Generally with the low end, you're dealing with something that's been cast, like, you know, a keyboard that we saw recently in our latest video prior to this one, or something that's being run with just a super, super high MOQ of like 5, 8, 10,000 units. But this is what I would consider a classic TKL. It's great. The only thing that is OEM about this is the hot swap only option and the fact that you can get it fully built. But besides that, the bottom case looks like any standard keyboard bottom case. Let's have ourselves a look at the top case. And again, looks like a very standard top case. You know, looks like this could be top mount, but in this case, they went gasket mounting. Here we can see our little badge that goes through. It's just a single piece. You got 2 little triangles poking out. You know, machining is fairly simple. There are no alignment pillars or anything like that because they're not needed, because this is seamless. So the top case basically covers the entirety of the bottom case, so we don't need to worry about any case movement. Which gets us to the plate and PCB assembly. So PCB has multiple controllers, which is to be expected considering you need Bluetooth and you need 2.4 gigahertz and you need wired support and you need battery charging. Fair enough. And there are quite a few LEDs on this board, but they're not where you'd think they are. So it doesn't have LEDs everywhere. There are LEDs here, 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 which translates to this and that. And then you have your scroll lock, if I'm not mistaken, and your caps lock. Yeah. So they are indicators only. Oh, but Simon, what are these indicating? Well, this actually indicates your mode of employment or usage. So it'd be USB 2.4, Bluetooth 1, Bluetooth 3, Bluetooth 2, Bluetooth 3, etc. So yeah, okay. And if we look over here, I mean, you'd have to be very familiar with looking at an ISO PCB, but you can see that we do indeed have ISO support, which is pretty cool. That is indeed pretty cool. Unfortunately, if you buy it with the caps, you don't have ISO support. So the bare bones kit has ISO support, but the pre-built kit does not have ISO support, which kind of lame, but kind of okay. It depends how you approach this. So plate, polycarb, 1.5 millimeter, and it's not the super soft polycarb. There are like 3 major grades of polycarb. Not grades, but like 3 major types. You've got the very soft floppy one. You've got like the medium, like there's some give to it. And then you have the super hard one, which like will shatter in your hands if you try and flex it too hard. This sits right in the middle. So this is, for example, a little bit stiffer than the Glare polycarbonate half plate that I have. This is a little harder than like the i69 plate. I know, I just named a keyboard that literally 9 people have, but This is right about on par with the original KFE, which again is like a keyboard that 10 people have. Use your imagination, okay? It's not too hard, it's not too soft. God damn it. But it's good. It's a good sounding plate. It's a well-designed plate as well. Switches go in, no interference, no bent switches, none of that stuff. Great. You can see little screws here, here, and a few other places. And those are standoffs because when you have a hot swap PCB and you were theoretically to remove all the switches, the PCB would just fall out the back. But the standoffs keep it in place, which, fine, whatever. Not a big fan of hot swap. And the reason why I'm not a big fan of hot swap is generally when you try and take off a keycap, you end up removing the switch. But in this case, with a well-designed plate, no problem. So, unironically, this is the first hot swap PCB in which hot swap has not been a problem for me. And yes, I know the top of this switch came off earlier, but the top of the switch came off. The switch didn't come out of the PCB. So it's in there. The plate is very well done. All right, so let's talk about, shout out to Dan, the build. So the stabs, amazing. So these were built at the factory by Dan, shout out Dan, sounds great. The switches are Gateron matcha switches, which are, I'll give you a little tour of the switch. If I can learn how to use this freaking thing. There we go. Give you a little tour of the switch. So, right there. It's got like a tan beige color with a green stem. Nice and simple. They got a little bit of factory lube on them. They feel pretty good. And if I'm not mistaken, these are exclusive to Luminkey. And they are, again, the only switch option. I don't know what the weight of these switches are, but they feel like 60-ish. Let's have a look. Switches, Luminkey, Silva linear switches? Really? They say Gateron on them. Yeah, I guess they're linears. All right, well, yeah, I can't find a spring weight, but that feels around about 60, if I had to guess, maybe even 62. But more 60 than 62. Anyway, switches, good switches. Build, good build. Overall, quite happy with it. The caps, however, are bad. The caps have been very, very problematic. Now, I know that there's a little bit of distortion on my overhead camera, but let's see if we can spot any irregularities. Okay, I'll try and keep this perfectly flat. You see how the S looks like it's bent between the S and the D? You see how like the O, this whole area just looks a little bit like warped in various directions? So that's not the switches. That's just the caps. The caps are not great. Now the caps are double shot PBT, which is precisely the issue. PBT is really, really, really hard to do double shot, especially true double shot PBT. Now, when people generally say double shot PBT, it's usually PBT exterior with a palm interior, because when you're dealing with PBT and its shrinkage, the inner shot will shrink so much that it'll start cracking and breaking. It's really hard to work with. And some companies have done very well. Like Leopold was the first to do good double shot and triple shot PBT. Keychron's keycaps are light years ahead of this, but Keychron's keycaps don't come in a nice beige. So what you're essentially paying for when we're talking about a build or a built unit is a $65 price difference, of which you have 90-ish switches, which if we assume they cost like $40, let's say $30, let's say $35, okay? So $35, that leaves us with $30 for the caps and the build. And Dan, shout out Dan, you know, generally a build cost with like lubed stabs, decent build, put the foams in. It was flawless when I got it. 10, 20 bucks. Probably, less in China, but, let's say 10 bucks. That leaves 20 bucks for the keycaps. Now, are these bad keycaps for $20? No. But they're not good keycaps for $20. So, the way that I have approached this particular keyboard is approaching it with a very specific use case. And that very specific use case is I want a actual custom keyboard that isn't some mass manufactured OEM stuff that feels good, sounds good, and looks like a real keyboard, and is wireless, and is fully built, just for my convenience. And to be fair, yeah, this is good. This does quite good. Now, let me turn this back on real quick, just to make sure that I haven't missed anything in my notes. Let's get this ribbon cable back in. Okay, sorry for back of the head content. But sometimes we struggle to get it in the hole. Happens to the best of us. All right, let's get this off again because I have to turn, and we just rip the switch apart again. So not only are the caps not good, but the caps are also really, 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 really tight on your switches. Realistically, it's not an issue unless you had to turn your keyboard on and off all the time, which, considering the horrible placement of the on-off switch, you probably wouldn't. You'd probably just let the battery run out if you're not using it. Okay, 1 second. My hands are a little shakier than usual today. There we go. All right, this is on, right? No, it is not. Let's turn it on. Okay, now it's on. All right, let me check my notes. Luminkey. All right. So I have my pros and cons from my building and usage experience. So this entire video has been me. I forgot to screw these in. Okay, this entire video has been me comparing it to the Keychron because my initial notes was me comparing it to something like the Cycle 8. I think this stands no chance compared to something like the Cycle 8, which I know doesn't exist yet. But this does stand a chance if you're approaching it as a pre-built. It's probably the best pre-built you could possibly buy. It's for sure the best wireless pre-built. But let me go through my my pros and cons real quick. So pros, Cycle 80 doesn't exist yet, and Cycle 80 will probably, or Cycle 8, I don't know what they're calling it. It will likely be a group buy. This is in stock, which is nice. This has ISO support, which is nice. This has wireless, Bluetooth 2.4 gigahertz. It's good. The finishing on this is great. It's surprisingly good. This is a real custom keyboard. It's not pretending to be. I wouldn't go as harshly to say that Keychrons are pretending to be high-end boards, but it's a thin line. So the pre-built aspect of this is very well done. Shout out Dan. Okay. Very good switch choice. Only giving one switch choice and making it a very good, very smooth, very well-sounding linear switch. Perfect. Don't give people options if you already have the best option. Comes with a hard case, which a Keychron does not. Actually sounds great without foam, and you'll hear it. And the foam is easy to remove if you buy it pre-built. All right, so my cons. I had issues with the JSON files, which has been resolved for everyone else except for me, but I still had that pain and suffering. There is no solder variant, which if you're approaching this like you should be approaching this, which is, what is the best wireless custom pre-built that I can possibly get, it's this by a long shot. Unless you really like HHKB layout, and then, well, HHKB hybrid. So, plate options, you get no plate options. You get this. That's fine. And the stock caps are just bad, okay? They're bad. I understand that, you know, under the budgetary constraints of what the kit is, the caps, I mean, I'm still using them, and you know, from a sound and feel perspective, they're fine. It's just the shrinkage. But for how nice the case is, how nice the build is, not great. All right, so if you're looking at this purely as a bare bones kit, so no switches, no caps, the Cycle 8 is going to have way better, way nicer materials. It's going to be cheaper. You know, this is not like, this is a good custom enthusiast board, but it's not as enthusiast as other enthusiast stuff. So it's a hard fight. If you're looking at this as a bare bones, it's difficult to recommend this knowing the kind of stuff that's coming soon. But if you're looking at existing stuff, like for example, the Frog, obviously the Frog has way more materials, way more machining, but is more expensive, you know, and doesn't have wireless and isn't as convenient. So anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's close this up real quick. Okay, I feel like one of these little gasket mounts are slightly out of place, even though I checked them. Apparently I should have checked them twice. All right. There we go. All right. So let's talk about the general like typing experience and all of that, and like build recommendations. We'll start with my build recommendations. Here's my build recommendation. Get this in pre-built. Get this in a pre-built variant because this is fantastically done. Will you have to go in and remove the foam? That's your choice if you want to remove the foam. But this sounds really good without the foam. This sounds like a big boy board, which is saying something. So let's say you were to get a bare bones kit because you want to go ISO or you want to have nicer caps, etc., etc. I personally still think it's worth buying it built and just like taking the caps that come with it and giving it to a friend or something and be like, here you go, free caps, and put on the caps that you want. But theoretically, let's say you go full bare bone, considering polycarbonate plate is your only option, still stick with full nylon housing switches. So that's cherries, black Gaterons, something like this, just full nylon housing. So maybe milky tops. It's up to you. I wouldn't go with like super high pitch sounding stuff, like some thinner switches, some Texis, some JWKs, because on polycarbonate, might end up a little bit too high pitched, you know. And then yeah, for caps, honestly, the PBT, like I said, has sounded great, has felt great. It just doesn't look good. And you know, I think if Create Keeps, the guys that do the Luminkey, were to just get their caps just the tiniest bit better, then this is a major contender. Because there we go. Because unlike, you know, previous things like this, specifically the Keychron, this is a real board. This is a real enthusiast board. If I were to show you this, or if I were to go back 2 years ago and show you this, you'd just be like, oh, that's a nice TKL. Yeah, this is a nice TKL. If I were to tell you it was $280 all in, built to my door with a hard case and a whole bunch of accessories, you'd lose your mind. Now, obviously, you know, the tides have changed and we've got way cheaper stuff. But as an OEM, absolutely fantastic. I have been thoroughly enjoying it. So let's do a little typing test, and then we'll go into the summary. As always for the typing test, wear headphones. Turn your volume down, up and down, until the background noise matches your background noise, and you will have an accurate sound test experience. See you there. All right, it's summary time. Luminkey 80 is good. Is good keyboards. Now, I hope you watched the actual video because there's a lot of stuff in there. And if you just skipped right to the summary, like I know you just did, yeah, talking to you, Kevin, go back and watch the video. All right, so the way that I view the Luminkey 80 is by process of elimination. If I want the best, no hassle, wireless board, and I want it to be an actual custom, an aluminum custom, this is the best contender. If I want something lighter, HHKB hybrid, obviously the next one. Gateron sits a lot lower because in terms of sound and feel and aesthetic experience, it's more of a mass-produced board with, not as good as a play. Typing experience isn't that great. Their keycaps are a lot better, sure, but this has been a treat to type on. Now, I will be paying to keep this keyboard because it's such a good board. I find myself consistently using it because, very niche use case, but let's say I'm doing a keyboard build on my desk. Normally I have to unplug my keyboard, and then I don't have a keyboard while I'm building a keyboard, but with this, the keyboard's over here. I can still type on it. It's pretty cool. Yes, I know. Boomer is mind blown by wireless, but this is a good wireless board. I now have two good wireless boards. HHKB hybrid, which unfortunately is Bluetooth only, and this, which is 2.4 gigahertz, which has been great. I have played games on it. No noticeable lag. Obviously, I'm not a pro gamer, but I'm pretty sure a pro gamer would still slap you using this board, even if your mind was like directly wired to the game. So, finishing, great. The actual build, shout out to Dan, great. The switches, great. The fact that it's hot swap only, for the first time ever, I don't care, because it did not impact my usage. I can pull caps out, and I'm not pulling switches out, which is great. And then finally, the wonkiness of the firmware and all of that, which should be resolved for everyone else. Thankfully, I took one for the team. This should be ready for any proper enthusiast that wants a good wireless board, as well as somebody that's, just coming up in the hobby that's looking for something that's already built for them that they can play around with using hot swap. Comes with caps, comes built, comes with foams, and they can start fiddling around with it, get a little curious, remove some foams, see how, the other half lives, and just use it. I think this board is great. Unironically, this board has surprised me. and it surprised me that like I still use it. It's been a good board. It's a good solid board. It proves that, you know, do we need all these keyboards? Do we need to spend many tens of thousands of dollars on board collections? Yes. Yes, we do. Thank you for watching my video. Leave a like if you like keyboard content, and drop a sub if you are not already a keyboard friend. I'll see you guys in the next review, which is a kangaroo.